All right, today we're diving into a group of bacteria that, we've all heard of, but maybe don't really get. I'm talking about Streptococcus.
So what's the connection? Well, it turns out they're both caused by members of the exact same bacterial family. And this is a really fascinating group because they're living all over us and even inside us, most of the time without causing any trouble.
Okay, so let's get right into it. First things first, what exactly is Streptococcus? Let's get to know this little chain gang.
So the name itself, Streptococcus, actually comes from Greek. It means twisted berry, which is honestly a perfect description of what they look like under a microscope. And you'll see this term gram-positive. All that means is that they have this really thick cell wall that soaks up a special purple dye that scientists use. It's one of the first things they look for in the lab to figure out what they're dealing with. And here you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Look at that image on the left. You see those little purple spheres all lined up? Those are the bacteria, forming these really distinct chains. And that's their signature move, right? They divide along one single line, which is what creates these chains and gives the whole group its name.
But it's not just about their shape. They have a whole list of other key traits. Things like they don't move on their own, and they can live with or without oxygen. But that catalase negative one, that's a huge deal in the lab. It's a quick test that instantly tells a scientist, hey, this isn't staph, which is another common bug. You can think of all these traits together as the bacteria's unique fingerprint.
All right, so we've got this huge family of bacteria. How in the world do scientists sort them all out? Well, they have this really clever method, almost like a bacterial sorting hat.
The key is how they react to blood. I'm not kidding. They're grown on a special plate that contains sheep's blood, and scientists just watch what happens. They classify them based on how they break down or, eat those red blood cells. It's a process called hemolysis, and it's the first big step to figuring out which strep you're looking at.
And this one simple test gives you 3 totally different results. First, you've got alpha hemolysis. That's where you see this greenish color, because the bacteria are only partially breaking down the blood cells. Then there's beta hemolysis. Whoa, that's a completely clear zone around the bacteria. Total destruction. That tells you it's releasing some pretty powerful toxins. And finally, gamma hemolysis, which is basically nothing. The bacteria just leave the blood cells alone. Just by looking at the plate, you get your first big clue about how dangerous one of these guys might be.
So this whole sorting system is super useful for zeroing in on the major players, especially the ones that can make us sick. So let's meet some of the most wanted pathogens in the Streptococcus family.
First up, the one you've probably heard of, Streptococcus pyogenes, or Group A strep. This is the bad guy behind strep throat. And remember that beta hemolysis we just talked about? The total destruction? That's this one's calling card. And you really don't want to mess with it, because if you leave it untreated, it can lead to some really serious stuff like rheumatic fever, which can actually damage your heart.
Next on the list is Streptococcus pneumoniae. This one usually does that partial greenish alpha hemolysis, and its name kind of gives it away. It's a major cause of bacterial pneumonia, especially for little kids and the elderly. But it doesn't stop there. It's also a big reason for ear infections and can cause a really dangerous form of meningitis.
Okay, remember that question from the very beginning about strep throat and cavities? Well, here's the other half of that answer. Meet Streptococcus mutans. This one lives in all of our mouths, and it is the master architect of cavities. Its whole game is turning the sugar you eat into acid that just wrecks your tooth enamel.
And finally, we have Streptococcus agalactiae, also known as Group B strep. Now, for most adults, this one just hangs out harmlessly in the gut. But it's a huge concern for newborns. During childbirth, it can cause really life-threatening infections like sepsis and meningitis, which is why pregnant women are screened for it.
So you gotta be asking, how do these tiny little bacteria cause such massive problems? Well, they come armed to the teeth with what scientists call virulence factors. Just think of them as a whole arsenal of biological weapons.
Let's take S. pyogenes again. It has a whole toolkit for making us sick. It's got something called M protein on its surface that's like an invisibility cloak. It helps it hide from our immune cells. Then it has hemolysins, these toxins that literally blow up our red and white blood cells. That's what causes that clear zone on the blood plate. And it can also release these things called pyrogenic exotoxins, which are responsible for the classic rash you see in scarlet fever.
And check this out. It has this one really sneaky trick. So your body's natural reaction to an invasion is to form a little clot around the bacteria to trap them, right? It's like building a wall. Well, S. pyogenes just releases an enzyme called streptokinase that dissolves the wall. It's a literal clot buster. And just like that, the infection is free to spread wherever it wants.
Meanwhile, our cavity-causing friend, S. mutans, plays a totally different game. It doesn't need to invade your body, it just builds a fortress right on your teeth. It creates this super sticky film we all know as dental plaque. And inside that safe little fortress, it just eats sugar all day and produces acid, which slowly but surely eats away at your tooth enamel.
Okay, so now that we know the enemy and its weapons, how do we fight back? Well, like any good battle, it all starts with solid intelligence, and that means getting a proper diagnosis in the lab.
Doctors have a whole process for this. First, they have to get a sample, like a throat swab. Then they'll do that gram stain to look for the classic purple chains under the microscope. After that, they grow it on that blood agar plate to see what kind of hemolysis it does. And from there, they can run a bunch of other specific tests to nail down the exact species.
And some of these tests are just brilliant. Take the CAMP test, for example. It's used to identify Group B strep. What they do is they streak a line of a different bacteria, Staph aureus, on the plate. Then they streak the unknown bacteria next to it. If it's Group B strep, it releases a chemical that works with the staph to create this superhemolytic zone that looks just like an arrowhead. It's such a cool visual confirmation.
So the big question is, can we treat these things? And the good news is, yes, we have some powerful counterattacks. For good old strep throat from Group A strep, penicillin's still a champ. It works great, but it's not always that easy. With other species, like S. pneumoniae, we're starting to see more and more antibiotic resistance. That makes treatment a lot trickier and means this is a battle we're going to be fighting for a long time.
So, when you step back and look at the whole picture, what's the big takeaway here? I think the world of Streptococcus is just this perfect example of balance, It's this massive family of bacteria, and most of them are totally harmless. They're just part of our body's normal neighborhood. But a select few have evolved these incredibly powerful tools that can cause some really serious diseases.
And that leaves us with a really big important question. If so many of these bacteria live on us and in us harmlessly all the time, what is it that tips the balance? What turns a peaceful resident into a dangerous invader? Is it a weakness in our own immune system? Does the bacterium pick up a new weapon? Figuring that out is honestly one of the biggest challenges in medicine today.